Double gain versus double loss. Verse number 25. What is good for one person and brings misery to another, such actions are opposed to the self. Remember, those who give great grief to another will fall into the fiery sea of hell and burn. Commentary. After presenting the positive approach to the happiness of all in the previous verse, Narayana Guru here counterbalances it with the negative approach, which brings in the problem of evil. All lovers of mankind throughout history, saints, philosophers, saviors, and masters, have given consideration to the problem of evil. In the last 3 or 4 verses, whenever the Guru referred to the other, he used a special word, aparan, meaning one who seems to be another, but when properly considered is not. Here, however, he uses paran, meaning one who definitely is another. When such a dichotomy comes into our life, and we do not see any kinship with another person, even the compunction against doing evil doesn't go very deep. A kind of morbidity comes to the mind. We become dull and insensitive to the pain we cause others. To that extent, we shrink into our egoistic shell and lose touch with the transcendent aspect of reality and its all-permeating beauty. One definition of the Absolute is Satyam Shivam Sundaram. Satyam means the all-pervading truth, Shivam the auspicious, peaceful, calm, which is absolutely harmonious, and Sundaram is that which is positively experienced as beauty par excellence. To have a comprehensive vision of the self, one should experience the overwhelming beauty of the Absolute in both its manifested and unmanifested states. When there is a deficiency of this vision, ignorance is casting its shadow on us. When the shadow of ignorance becomes more and more pronounced, we see less of truth and become increasingly identified with our physical entity, which separates us from our divine nature. This question is taken up and elaborated in one of Plato's dialogues, Timaeus. In it, the whole story of creation is discussed in a mythological way, and when you read it, it has a profound effect on your mind. It seems the Creator, at the time of creation, wanted to make a universe teeming with all kinds of life. He mixed together the essence of the 4 elements with his own immortal essence. His spirit, the divine, is indissoluble. It will always be immortal. The elements, however, are not. They come together and separate. The elements have their own qualities, such as the fire burning and the air moving as wind and causing hurricanes. Similarly, the water can be blown into great waves, and the earth can become morbid. These elements and their qualities are also present within each individual. When your elements are affected, sensations come from that side into your self or spirit. On the other hand, the capacity to know and to animate flows from the spirit into the 4 elements. There is a 2-way circulation from the elements to the self and from the self to the elements. This theory of Plato's is used by St. Augustine in developing his own study of evil. He considers evil to be a negative principle, unable to stand by itself, like a shadow cast by the sun. It is akin to a deficit intelligence in place of positive intelligence. It is also a deficit cause. This is given in another way in the Bhagavad Gita. In chapter 6, verses 5 and 6, we are given the instruction that the self should be raised by the self, and the self should never let down the self. The self is the best friend of the self, and the self can also become its own worst enemy. Whenever you consider part of the self as non-self, that non-self itself will become your enemy. It will behave as if it is your enemy. We can experiment this in our everyday life. If I consider a certain person as my very self, then it will be a great joy to have him around. Everything we do brings great joy to my heart. Seeing him, talking with him, admiring him. The joy does not happen anywhere else than in my heart. So I am bringing joy to myself by giving my love to him. But if I consider him as not being a part of me, as not belonging to me as part of myself, he may become my enemy. He is an other, and the very fact of seeing him walk into my room fills me with rage. My body starts shivering and trembling with anger. I cause myself great pain by hating him in this way, pain which may not affect him at all. Then I feel fear that this fellow has come to do some evil to me. I avoid him because I fear for my safety. He is my enemy and may become violent. He may take away my possessions. I start living in fear. Of course, it's all just an attitude within me. I can make myself happy in my friend's presence, or I can make myself very miserable just by changing my attitude. This is what the Gita calls making the anatma, the non-self, behave as the enemy. In considering part of your own self as non-self, you make that part a potential enemy. In one way or another, we are all doing this every day by alienating people, by negating people, by cultivating discontent within ourselves. It is a scourge, a plague. If we do not like the presence of certain people, their very look or sound, we don't have anything to do with them. In this way, we chop up our world into so many small bits and poison several of them. So when this friend we are speaking of comes to me, I turn to my other friend and say, "Look, our good friend is here." Then her mind also brightens up. Another friend asks, "Who is here?" "Oh, it's our friend." And she also becomes happy. Happiness is contagious. On the other hand, if I say, "Here comes that idiot, I don't like him at all," my enmity also is contagious. My other friends do not have any problem with that person, but when they hear me talk like that, they also become negative. They wonder what that guy has done for me to hate him, and they become suspicious. My negativity spreads like a cancer from one heart to another. Thus, all the time we create smoke and fumes, poisonous pollution of the mind, and enmity everywhere. Then bickering, gossip, and backbiting appear on all sides. The Naraka Abdhi, the ocean of hell the Guru speaks of, is not anywhere far away. It is right where we are. Narayana Guru's disciple Nataraja Guru, in his commentary on this verse, says that when a spark of fire goes into a pile of sticks, it does not just burn one tiny bit of it. It will affect the next piece and the next until it becomes a conflagration. Like that, when we sow the seeds of discontent, it is contagious. In a very literal sense, it can become a hellfire, even when small discontentments accumulate. An example of this is the little pamphlets printed and circulated in Japan prior to World War that said, America is our worst enemy. Our fleets and manufactured goods are rivaled by American mercantilism and American capitalistic expansion, so they are our enemies. Spread this to every corner of Japan. In America, the same kind of rumor was spread. Japan is our own worst enemy. If we allow that country to go on expanding, there won't be any America left. In each country, stereotypes and prejudices were fostered and reinforced. Soon American minds were filled with venom, and Japanese minds were filled with venom. A terrible war was fought, culminating in atom bombs being dropped on two Japanese cities. That was real hellfire. Tens of thousands of people burned in no time, and many more slowly suffering horrible pain and death. It is not just a story, Narayana Guru is telling us. It can become actual at any moment. It all begins from just one spark of discontentment or one wrong notion, and we have millions of them from which to choose. America has a huge stockpile of deadly weapons, enough to annihilate the entire planet many times over. Until recently, Russia's stockpile was almost as large, and at least a half a dozen other countries have nuclear arsenals. What are we doing? Accumulating the ability to devastate the whole universe. It all begins as paranoia in the mind of one person expressed to another. Someone in the CIA or the Pentagon says, I really see the possibility of Russia or China attacking us tomorrow. And then we go mad, preparing to do more destruction than ever before. Unfortunately, it is not only in the matter of realization that the oneness of the self operates, it also works very efficiently in becoming polluted with negativity. St. Augustine took two ideas from Plotinus and Plato: deficient causation and the aesthetic conception of evil. Man has free will. The freedom of his will, when it is in resonance with a universal will of goodness, is a salvaging factor. Free will can also become a free expression of the ego, which is cut off from the light of the spirit. When it is cut off, it places sensory pleasure or physical well-being as more cherishable than spiritual excellence. This is the idea of deficient causation. Nature itself is against such kinds of excesses, which the egoistic will brings upon life. When a person relishes his food too much and goes against nature's laws by becoming gluttonous, the excessive food poisons his physical body. He eats more than he can digest properly and accumulates toxins that are absorbed and that cause him physical disease. Plotinus and St. Augustine say here that nature is coming to our aid to save us from the excess of free will originating from the dark side of the self, which is the ego. Like physical disease, other kinds of excess bring war, pestilence, and so many other problems. The exclusive growing of vast areas of one type of crop, for instance, has brought about an explosion of damaging insects and plant diseases. The pollution we release in the air has devastated forests, caused cancer in humans, and even eroded buildings. The list of such excesses is very long. All of them are considered as the evil which originates from man's free will. Man should learn how he can exercise a true free will, which is when he is freeing himself from the clutches of his sensuality, from the demands of his vasanas, and when he is seeing the oneness of all from inside. Only after getting free of these conditionings does true freedom of will come. Otherwise, you think you have free will, but you are a slave to your senses and your urges. You make your reason a kind of donkey, upon which evil rides to its own destruction. The second thing St. Augustine shows us is also in the Bhagavad Gita, which says you can only free yourself by being the Absolute. As St. Augustine poetically puts it, if you can see the grand beauty of the panorama of creation and sing with the mind of the Creator, you make a beautiful world for yourself. The gorgeous sun which rises in the east as a golden disk, the gentle breezes that come from the salty oceans, and the breezes from the mountains laden with the aroma of spices, the clouds that bring rain to our gardens, the singing birds and the blooming flowers, the variety of plants that provide food for man and other beings. When we see this grand beauty everywhere, we are having a panoramic vision of the Absolute. We become so saturated with the sense of its magnificence that we cannot alienate ourselves from the wonderful goodness of the Absolute. This is where the aesthetic cause of evil comes in. When you have lost the sensitivity to appreciate things aesthetically, when you become incapable of seeing the beauty of creation, you become a corrupted person. One possible misunderstanding that can arise from this verse is to think of action in a linear way. If we consider all the actions that we do in life and their virtues, we may be filled with a sense of self-righteousness and see injustice in our sufferings for things which we have seemingly never done. This is a linear vision, and karma is not to be understood as linear. It is highly complex. Our actions make one composite whole, and our responsibility to each other is unlimited. If we do not understand our unlimited liability to each other and make it a partial one, then our thinking becomes relativistic. Our understanding is no longer that of an absolutist. Any deficit in any of us is also a deficit of the whole. The deficit action of one can weaken the whole system to an extent. The contributory effect of that kind of karma is like a carbuncle, which is a localized disturbance, but the poison it generates circulates throughout the body. In a sense, it is the poison of the whole body that comes and accumulates as a carbuncle in one place. Similarly, through specific people, the poison of our collective activity is manifested. If that person retrospects about his own personal life, he may not see anything to justify the pain coming particularly to him. Here it is not the individual but the collective self which is suffering. Only if you take it in this way will the suffering of Christ make any sense. Otherwise, how can his crucifixion be a matter of concern to anyone after 2000 years? How does that help? It was not just one person's action. A sacrifice was given in a collective sense. Although the sacrifice was of one person, in it we see the essence of the entire universe. We have to see it both ways. One person's sacrifice as a sacrifice for all, and the evil of many people as the evil that affects each person. I recommend to you both Plato's Dialogues and St. Augustine's City of God, chapter 12, 6, 7, and Confessions, chapter 7, 13, for further reading, because this is more than a fascinating study. It is our daily problem. It is good to have some insight into it. Some of the finest souls on earth have given their best thoughts to this subject, and these books do a great amount of searching. With this verse and the previous one, Narayana Guru gives the world his contribution of social ethics based on self-realization. It should become a cardinal principle of our own lives. It is not confined to any creed. On the positive side, you are asked simply to see the self in all and befriend it. From the negative angle, you are told that if you make your own self alienated from you, you will cause a boomerang of the same evil upon you. Thus, for your own peace and unbroken joy, it is necessary to contribute to the general good every day and every moment. We take upon ourselves unlimited liability to bear the cross of all. We commit ourselves to be our brother's keepers. The best teaching of all the world's scriptures is epitomized here in 8 brief lines. And the free translation of verse 25 is, "What is good for one and might cause disaster to another is opposed to the unity of the self. Those who grievously hurt others will consequently bring upon themselves pain like hellfire."